Good afternoon, everyone. Can we quickly run a mic and camera test for everyone, please? Starting from Dr. Asgar, can we test your mic, sir, and your camera? Dr. Ranjit, I can see you. Can you please test your mic?
Is it audible?
Lovely. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
Dr. Janki, can we please test your mic and camera?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Lovely. Thank you, Dr. Janki.
Thank you.
Right. Right. Okay, let's begin now. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ritika Tiwari, a fellow at Sphere India. Welcome to a panel discussion on COVID Academy. Just a minute. I will just go ahead and see if we are live. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ritika Tiwari, a fellow at Sphere India. Welcome, everyone, to the panel discussion from COVID Academy platform of Sphere India in partnership with UNICEF and HCL Foundation. As you're aware, today is World Wetland Day. Now, wetlands are a very important part to our ecosystem, and it is sad that we don't know much about it. For beginners, we can say that wetlands have been destroyed at 90% rate since the 1700s. So 90% of them are no more there. And we are losing them 3 times as fast as we are losing our forests. Yet they are critical to our ecosystem, biodiversity, climate mitigation, and adaptation. Wetlands can be found in many geographies. You will find them in river deltas, you will find them in backwaters, you can even find them in the Arctic. But we do have a very good panel today that will be telling us more about. So I would like to give a very warm welcome to all our panelists. Dr. Janki Shah, Dr. Ketan would be joining us shortly. Dr. Asgar, welcome, sir, and Dr. Ranjit R.K. The moderator for the day was supposed to be too many doctors today. Was supposed to be Ms. Divya Gupta, but she had some emergency to attend to. So we have Ms. Nupur Tyagi. She's also a manager for KCS for the of KCS Sphere India. So let's go ahead and introduce a little about her. So Ms. Nupur is an architect and an urban planner. Can anybody confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic, thank you. All right. Ms. Nupur Tyagi is an architect and an urban planner. She is a professional she has been in a profession which includes multidisciplinary projects in planning, policy, and research. She is currently our manager. She's my manager, actually. And she would be moderating the discussion today. A little ground rules about how these panel discussions normally go. So we have our participants, and we also have YouTube Live. So we get comments there, and you can go ahead, ask your questions in the chat box. Once we are done with the discussion of all the panelists, there will be a question and answer round where the participants will be able to ask questions to the panelists. And if you want, you can go ahead, the ones who are on YouTube Live can go ahead and ask questions there. We will be happy to ask them on your behalf, right? With that, I would like to give it over to Ms. Nupur, who would be moderating the session today. Over to you, Nupur.
Ritika, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining today's session. Firstly, I would like to quickly introduce today's panel to everyone. So today we are joined by Dr. Asgar Nawab. So Dr. Asgar is a program head ecology with Wetlands International South Asia, and he is leading multidisciplinary projects on wetlands assessment and ecosystem services evaluation, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction for community resilience, and conservation of freshwater species and habitats in different landscape across India. And our second panelist today is Dr. Ranjit KR. So Dr. Ranjit is a PhD in aquatic chemistry, and in his 18 years of experience, he has worked in many organizations on the diverse projects. And he was also principal investigator, DEST SCRC Fast Track Project, followed by Environment Expert Society of Integrated Coastal Management, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And currently, he is a scientist at Center for Water Resource Development and Management. And he was also awarded Young Scientist Fellowship by Department of Science and Technology. Now moving on to our next panelist, Dr. Janki Shah. So Dr. Shah has done her master's in environmental science and PhD with the focus on climate change adaptation as well as sustainable livelihoods. And she has completed her research work in decentralized composting. She has worked on various thematic focuses, including climate change, water security, community engagement, youth mobilization, governance, along with sustainable rural development. Currently, she is program coordinator, sustainable rural development programs with the Center for Environmental Education. Our fourth panelist today who will be joining us shortly, Dr. Ketan Tatu. So Dr. Ketan is serving as the senior scientist at Gujarat Ecological Education and Research Foundation, Gandhinagar in Gujarat. And he is also wetland ecology expert member of Gujarat State Wetland Authority. He has earned a PhD in environment science from Gujarat University by conducting a research on Nal Sarovar, a Ramsar site based in Gujarat. And he has also earned PhD from West Virginia, USA, by conducting research on impact of mute swan herbivory on submerged vegetation in Chesapeake Bay, Maryland. Now I would like to convey my sincere thanks to the esteemed panel for joining us for this session on the occasion of World Wetlands Day. And on this occasion, Sphere India would like to raise national and global awareness about wetlands in order to reverse their rapid loss and encourage actions to conserve and restore them with this panel discussion. And with that aim, I invite our first speaker, Dr. Asghar Nawab. Sir, we would like to know from you that what is Ramsar Treaty of 1971? What circumstances arose that led the countries to sign this treaty, sir? So with that, I hand over the dice to you to take the discussion forward, sir.
Thank you so much, Nupur. And before I actually answer the query, I take this opportunity to thank Team Sphere India for inviting me in this panel discussion. And so basically, they say the Ramsar Convention is a UN environmental treaty. And this was established in 1971 at the Iranian city called Ramsar. So the treaty, it essentially provides the national action and international cooperation regarding the conservation of wetlands. And as of the latest figures, there are about 170 countries which are signatory. And currently, more than 2,000 wetlands have been designated as the Ramsar site globally. And India ratified the convention in 1982, and currently it hosts 47 wetlands designated as Ramsar sites. So moving on to your second part of the query about the circumstances arising for countries to sign the treaty. So it's actually a pretty nice, interesting history. And if I take you to the background, I mean, the genesis of this Ramsar Convention, it actually took place in the early 1960s when the several European countries they realized that wetlands and primarily the large stretches of marshlands are being rapidly destroyed and degraded. So, the IUCN, along with the International Waterfowl Research Bureau and the International Council for Bird Preservation, they launched a program to increase awareness of the importance of wetlands to humanity and to and the biodiversity. So at that particular point of time, this project was entitled as Project MAR, M-A-R, and it was one of these international conferences held in France in 1962. And subsequently to this, several other conferences were held, and many recommendations were made. But eventually, in 1971, when this conference took place, there was a convention, an international convention that was adopted to ensure the effective and coordinated operation of this entire network, that is Project MAR. And eventually, thus the Ramsar wetland sites were also notified, and the Ramsar Convention actually started to happen. And interestingly, Ramsar wetland sites are actually of international importance, especially as waterfowl habitat, even today. And it's perhaps since the 9 criteria for designating a Ramsar site, so one of the criteria happens to be a criteria targeting or aiming the conservation of waterfowls, which actually says that almost at least some 20,000, a population of some 20,000 at one given point of time is available at a site, at a wetland site, and which can actually then be nominated and designated as a Ramsar site. So this is the story and the history behind the Ramsar Treaty.
And thank you so much, sir. The information was very insightful, and knowing the history of the Ramsar Convention has really set wonderful context for today's discussion. And with that, I would move on to the second speaker, Dr. Ranjit. So Dr. Ranjit, we would like to know from you what, according to you, and what you think are the threats to the wetlands. If you could illustrate some examples towards that, that'd be great, sir.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Sphere India, for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. Even though we all are aware that wetlands are no longer the wastelands and they are actually the biodiversity hotspots, freshwater stores, carbon sinks, and a source of livelihood for millions of people, yet they are the most threatened ecosystems around the world. Our Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Report found that most both inland and coastal ecosystems are degraded, as mentioned at the introduction itself, at a rate faster than or any other ecosystems. So that is a major threat that they are facing. Long-term average loss of wetlands are estimated to be about 54 to 57% in a long-term average globally, and it has accelerated about 4 times in the last 20 to end of late 20th century to the early 21st century. So that is the main issue that we are facing, and because of the wetland losses degradation, people are deprived of the ecosystem services that wetlands are providing. So if you put that into an economical perspective, that there are about $2.7 trillion loss from 1997 to about 2011. That is in an estimate in less than 15 years of time. The global value of ecosystem services, actually, because of that, there was a huge loss of ecological values. And from the WWF data, we can see that the freshwater plant living index actually has decreased about 76%. So there are a lot of freshwater species are going into extinction. That is another major impact or threat that we are facing, that due to the degradation of the wetlands. in my state, Kerala, also, we can proudly, we used to proudly say that Kerala has the largest portion of land area under wetlands among all states of India. But actually, from 2014, we can say that about 49%, or about dramatic decrease of 49% in the total areas of wetlands has been happened in Kerala during the past 20 years or so. So what is the, if you try to pinpoint what are the major issues, that means wetland loss and degradation, the primary indirect drivers are obviously population growth and increasing economic development, but the indirect drivers, but direct drivers are actually the climate change, habitat change, invasive species, over exploitation of, and of course pollution has a major role to play in that. And you can say that agriculture practices and systems and practices have had a very bad impact on the inland and coastal wetlands globally. Extensive use of water for irrigation, you can say that about 70% is the rate. Usually we find that 70% of globally water is used for irrigation, and excess nutrient loading because of the excessive use of nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers have resulted in the declination of water quality and the quantity declination in this wetland system. And another aspect is the introduction of invasive species, because it is estimated that worldwide 2/3 of the freshwater species introduced into the tropics, and more than half of the that gets introduced into the temperate regions are self-sustaining. That is a major threat to the local indigenous species. And another threat is, of course, we know that all the mangroves, seagrasses, meadows, and coral reefs are being converted to other land use because of the pressure from the human population increase. And you know, coastal population is about 2 to 3 times higher than that of inland areas. So that is one of the major issues with this wetlands. Another issue comes with the freshwater diversion. We know that because of the construction of dams and all, that has resulted in the delivery of this freshwater into these coastal wetlands especially. Then nutrient load, as I mentioned earlier, nutrient loading has resulted in the excessive use of fertilizers. Excessive use of fertilizers has resulted in the excessive nutrient load into the wetland system, and that has resulted in eutrophication. Eutrophication is actually an increase of this productivity in this excess plant nutrient production. Because of the excess nutrients, there are increased plant production that has actually resulted in this algal blooms. In many are toxic blooms, and even though it's that accelerated growth has resulted in the species richness, in the loss of species richness, and that has made the benthic substratum anoxic, and that has actually deprived of oxygen. So many other oxygen stress related issues, and hydrogen sulfide gets liberated due to the absence of this oxygen, and these microorganisms, they result to other oxidizing agents like nitrous oxide, nitrates and sulfates. So that means and that has resulted in the actually partial denitrification has resulted in the emission of NOx, the greenhouse gases, and also methanogenesis has resulted in the liberation of methane into the atmosphere. So these healthy wetlands, which are considered to be the carbon sinks or the climate buffers, are slowly tending to be act as a climate actually that enhancing the greenhouse gases emission and accelerating the climate change. So that is one of the major issues that is happening with the wetlands nowadays. Another thing is, of course, pollution. So pollution has resulted in the deterioration of quality of the wetlands. And we know that chemical pollutants, because of the synthetic chemicals that gets discharged into the aquatic water bodies, especially coastal water bodies, has actually resulted in the accumulation of these into the biota because of the bioaccumulation and biomagnification. And you know that most of these synthetic chemicals are actually non-biodegradable. So they are persistent in nature, and once they gets released into the aquatic system, they are not getting removed very easily. So they remain in the system for long periods, and that has resulted in the decrease of quality of water as water quality, as well as health issues to the consumers actually, and you consumers are humans. And according to a new report by CPCB, about 355 rivers in Kerala, in India, river stretches in India are actually polluted. So that has a major issue here because of the lack of solid waste treatment facilities in India, and it is estimated that more than 72% of the effluents that get discharged into the rivers and other water bodies or surface water bodies without proper treatment. So that is a very, very big issue that has resulted in the decrease of water quality. And another another issue that is getting emerged is the endocrine emerging pollutants, that they are actually endocrine disruptors, and these emerging pollutants are actually synthetic or naturally occurring chemical that actually not commonly monitored or regulated in the standards that you usually prescribe, CPCB or BAS standards that never address these emerging pollutants, because they are present in very nanogram levels, and we need very sophisticated instruments to detect it at these small levels. So they are usually unaddressed, but they are actually they include the chemicals like pharmaceuticals, personal care products, pesticides, then surfactants, like that, solvents, etc. So because of that, they get they are very low biological degradation, and they have very high chronic toxicity. So they act as endocrine disruptors, and they actually the saddest thing is that how they get, once they enter the aquatic system, what is their fate and their transformation are not actually understood. So one common of that thing is the antibiotics. You know, once the antibiotics get into the drinking water system, what happens is that we get antibiotic resistance. So once we get antibiotic resistance, we are actually resistant to the many of the medicines that we usually take for this microbial diseases. So that increases the human mobility, mortality issues will come, and that increases the health costs also. So that is one of the emerging issue. And of course, microplastics is another issue that is actually pertaining in this ecosystem because of this indiscriminate use of plastics and their unscientific disposal. All these are ending up in our aquatic systems, and they actually gets disintegrated and finally taken up by the aquatic organism, and finally it is reaching our body also, and it has a lot of other complicated issues also. Then another things that is actually looming over our aquatic systems are the climate change. You know that because of these two main reasons are of climate change are well addressed because of the land use changes that we are doing, and also that indiscriminate use of these fossil fuels have resulted in very high carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that actually has a lot of implications on the aquatic system, especially on coastal water bodies. Because of that, CO2 concentration, this sixth assessment report that is just recently published by IPCC has pointed out that carbon dioxide concentration is highest in the last 2 million years, and sea levels are increasing fastest rate, and Arctic Sea ice are melting, glaciers are melting. So these are the alarming signals. And we know that cyclones and the extreme weather events that are happening very less frequently are now a common phenomena. in India, and because of that, coastal community and coastal wetland systems are under major threat. And it is many studies have shown that, especially in my place Kerala and all, that sea level are actually increasing 3-4 times higher than that of the global average. Usually it is in the 1.5 to 3 millimeter is the global sea level rise per year, but in Kerala it has recorded about 1 to 1.2 centimeter. So that much increase is happening. So it's a major threat. And been as earlier pointed out that these coastal systems are actually, these wetlands are actually the carbon sequestration. They have very high carbon sequestration rate, because they actually sequester or capture carbon at a rate 2 to 4 times higher than forest, and they carbon burial rate is about 10 times higher. So to cut all these climate risks and to keep the 1.5 degree centigrade thing alive, wetlands are the key. So these are the major issues of that wetlands are now facing, and we have only one solution, that is to protect them and make them healthy. That is the only solace that we have.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjit. And firstly, thank you for emphasizing on the importance of ecosystems and also on the financial losses incurred due to wetland degradation. You very comprehensively discussed about the various indirect factors like population growth and direct factors, be it climate change, microplastics, and pollutants, which are leading to degradation of wetlands. And we think that the understanding of these drivers is developing understanding of these drivers is essential for any awareness as well as any subsequent conservation activity. So it was wonderful insights from you. And with that, I'll take my next question to Dr. Asghar. So if you could describe that what has been the impact of wetland degradation on flora and fauna, and if you could also shed some light on Wetland International's South Asia's work experience working on the peatlands, sir. Dr. Asghar?
Yeah, hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The degradation or the loss of wetlands and the impacts per se, the species that are dependent on them has been pretty much critical in the sense that it's almost say about 25% of the wetland dependent species they are now threatened with extinction. And since as the estimates suggest that since the 1970s, almost 35% loss or degradation of natural wetlands has been recorded, and this actually implies directly to the loss of a species habitat, which in fact is a major driver for concern. And you had asked about the information on the Arctic. I could not get your question on the Arctic. What was it, please?
So if you could share some insights on the visa's experience in working on peatlands.
Okay. So peatlands, visa has attempted to work on the peatlands, and but since the study itself on peatlands is in a very nascent stage in India, so there's not much information available. However, what we know as of now is that peatlands in India have been recorded in Kerala, Arunachal Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, and North Sikkim, and the Western Ghats, some parts of Western Ghats too. So the best that we are actually trying to accumulate more information and prepare and the evidence so that we can actually develop peat map of India. And the experience that we have had was working in the for the conservation and management of the Chandradal wetland in Himachal Pradesh. So we did find some locations wherein these peatlands were recorded, and we recorded the specific plant species that were occurring there. So, but as I said, that there's not much information on the peatlands as of now. But yes, of course, peatlands, as pointed out earlier by Ranjit, peatlands are really very much important, play a very important role in the maintaining the climate conditions, favorable climate conditions, and perhaps they are the best carbon sinks, covering around 3% of the Earth's surface. So yes, this is the little experience that we have, and it's just this much that I'm touching base on the peatlands.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for sharing that experience. And it's really alarming to know that 25% of the species are threatened because of environmental degradation. The number is very alarming, and we hope to see some positive work done by these.
This is particularly this is particularly for the obligate species. I mean,
right.
the species that are actually live throughout their life on the wetlands.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, sir. And with that, I'll take my next. Sorry, I'll take my next question to Dr.
Just a minute, can I intervene? Actually, Dr. Asghar would be leaving early. So if anybody has any questions for Dr. Asghar, you can please type the question or ask them. You can raise your hand. We can take the question for you. Nupur, you can continue. I'll check the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Ritika. So I'll take my next question to Dr. Janki Shah. Dr. Janki, if you could emphasize on what is the role on wetlands in climate resilience and livelihoods, and what are the challenges to wetland conservation, ma'am? Dr. Janki?
Thank you. Thank you, Nupur, and thank you, Sphere India, for this wonderful event where we are highlighting the importance of wetlands. In fact, the earlier two panelists have discussed its importance, and Dr. Ranjit elaborately talked about the challenges or threats to the wetland. I would begin with the question that you have, but before I get into that, I just want to take a minute to kind of say that when we generally, when we say forests, we have an image. It is understood, and when we talk of environmental conservation or nature education, a lot of time what we talk about is forest. We also talk sometime about aquatic birds, nature, river, serenity, but the moment the term wetlands comes, there is sometimes a confusion. So though there is a lot of understanding which is evolving about the wetlands in the scientific community, in generally about the environment community, in the professions who are into the sustainability field, but when we look into the community as a general, then there is still a lack of awareness about what wetlands is. I mean, what is wetland? So that is where I think one of the major challenges that remains, because unless we identify what it is, it becomes difficult to understand what importance it has in our own lives, our own livelihoods. And because we don't perceive the importance, it becomes more difficult to convince communities or people or think about it conservation. So I think first and foremost challenge begins with understanding and appreciating that my local pond within a village has a very, very critical role to play. And that's what a wetland is. A wetland is a very, very kind of broad terms, in the sense that it covers many things. It covers many things, basically saying where land and water meet. So there are a lot of things, temporary wetlands, permanent wetlands, and each one has its own role to play. Well, we have, I think, as we move further in the discussion, we'll be looking more from the wetland, from the biodiversity point of view, certainly. So I'll not get into that details, because that is like one factor that all of us certainly know. I would get more into the details of how do we look as wetlands, which are a source of climate resiliency to the community and the source of livelihood for the community. So first of all, to say that wetlands are like, it's all very many different types of water bodies. When we talk of inland water bodies, these are like the ponds, rivers, even freshwater lakes, even the irrigation reservoirs are also scientifically considered as wetlands, though now the wetland conservation rules which has recently come up, not recently, it's 2017. They kind of in that guidelines, the protection guidelines, those are not included in the wetland protection conservation rules, but for the ecosystem perspective, from the ecosystem service perspective, they are the wetlands. So now if we look at, some of the global data, Dr. Asgar also did talked about, and Dr. Ranjit also talked about it. But it is very interesting to think that it from a different perspective. See, we all know most of our agriculture produce needs water. And water that comes from rain is stored on surface in some form of wetlands. So wetlands are in a way a major source. They play a very critical role in providing water, which we say is our life. So water, drinking water, where it comes to, we may not be directly, the communities around it may not be directly fetching water out of it, but it helps in groundwater percolation, recharge. And data says that globally, half of the agriculture produce that we have, the food that we have, is something that comes from the, wetlands, the water. So wetlands are somewhere responsible for that. About 1 billion jobs, 1 billion people livelihoods depends on the wetlands. Now this can be the agriculture which is dependent on wetlands, and the further processing, water related things. So very many other things. So that's a very, very strong connection to kind of, explore. Also the importance is from the, the ponds in itself is a unit, but it has a multiple effect on the community life that surrounds it. Whether we say, let's say, and the links are direct, like water, that we all kind of immediately perceive. Agriculture, that is still pretty direct. But let's say gender, is there an impact? Now, women, we all know women had to walk kilometers to fetch water. Revival of ponds make the water available in the vicinity. Now, it has a huge impact on that, on their role, on their on the hardship that they had to go. Education. Now, if we explore those links, we would be immediately able to kind of make those connections, the links with education. With the climate resilience, of course, yes, because water is going to become one of the critical factors as the climate and especially the rainfall patterns become more erratic. Temperature control, so they also act as temperature regulators. Having a water body around does act as a temperature regulators, at least locally, and providing water helps in enhancing that water resiliency of the community. So that is also something which is very much linked. So in that way, it kind of connects very well with or has a very close connection with the food security of the communities, water security, of on the gender issues, on the climate resiliency, a lot of life that moves around it. Now, when we look at the conservation aspect of it, then there are several threats that Dr. Ranjit just mentioned. Now, there are one category of wetlands which are in the protected categories in terms of because of their biodiversity, and they are well known, and they are either under the forest department, so they have that Wildlife Protection Act and others which helps to protect. But at the same time, this small wetlands, uh, like for example, when the bird comes to Nal Sarovar or Thol here, they have a migratory route. So each smaller wetlands, permanent or temporary, based on the seasonal, they play a very critical role. And pollution there, even if the final destination is conserved, but pollution in the middle levels can also affect where the population roost, or so they have the impact. So conserving, protecting the wetlands from that perspective is also very important, which is not within that larger wildlife protection act, but they are part of the other. Now the challenge here is uh, like there are issues of encroachment, there are threats related to agriculture, especially agriculture water flowing into the wetlands. And wetlands are called kidneys of the nature because they absorb the pollution, they dilute it, they allows the especially the water pollution, so which like runoff water that comes, though it accumulates in the wetlands, but it also in a way filters it, and so that the groundwater is not is less contaminated. I would not say not polluted, but less contaminated, and it provides a way of dilution and accumulation of the pollutant. So now when we talk of conservation challenges, then obviously the community around it has to be involved in this whole process of conservation and management. So how do we create? First of all, there is a need for awareness and education that this has so many impacts, and also at the same time taking a holistic approach, because while let's say the drying of reducing water level or drying up of ponds in the some seasons, because many a time they are not the annual. So by the time the summer comes, they are like or winter ends, most of the time the village pond starts drying up. So activities like deepening them in a way that it does not harm the ecological purpose in terms of biodiversity also, that is very crucial. So you have to revive the ponds, you have to deepen the ponds in such a way that the original ecology is least disturbed. At the same time, there are, especially in the village context or even in the urban context, disposal of waste and the solid waste, dumping of solid waste is a major threat to the wetlands, because and generally when we go to any community, any areas around it, you'll see that the pond sites or pond catchments becomes the sites where the solid wastes are dumped. Now in this case, sometimes along with the awareness, we need some innovations, because there is a need to understand the fact that that solid waste management, especially when the areas are remote, is a challenge. So how do we provide them alternatives? That becomes very important. So alternatives like composting of the waste, creating separate at source segregation, so that the plastic does not reach to the wetlands, the boundaries of the wetlands, and providing separate sites where the composting can happen, or sanitary landfills can happen. So all those things play a very crucial role in ensuring that the village pollution does not reach the wetland. Now that requires, if we look at the link, then that requires a very holistic approach, because that means that every community member has to be made aware that you segregate your waste, you do not throw, you do not burn. The system, the panchayats have to be made aware to create those systems so that they can collect the waste. Our land has to be kind of made available so that the composting can take place. There has to be some training components so that the farmers can do the composting on their farms or on their agro waste. So these are like an entire chain of steps which needs to be taken in a systemic manner, where education, training, capacity building, they are required at each state. Same stands true for a lot of the time, the even in the smaller towns or the rural areas, the wetlands are the site where the sewage disposal happens. So how do you establish those treatment plants in a remote ways? That plays a very crucial role in terms of maintaining those wetlands. And when it comes to, as I already mentioned, when it comes to its revival, its cleaning, its deepening, then the care, for example, there are simple things like sometimes when the pond is deepened, it is completely deepened with using the JCB and all. Now then the depth becomes so much that the waterfalls which were coming, they prefer shallow lands, so they stop coming, or they don't find then that place to be useful. Now the village community, sometimes when you go, the community around it, they feel that okay, we need pond for agriculture. Why do we need to store more water? Why do we make it shallow? Because then the water holding capacity would reduce. So now in that sense, there are like guidelines and there are awareness which is required that you make the pond banks or the banks which are shallow, which is shallow. So those kind of approaches and understanding, technical understanding involving technical aspects, as well as the governance and community participation, all three is very, very crucial to be able to actually protect those wetlands on ground and involve them in the conservation. I think that is, and certainly once they see the benefit of doing it, there is always a realization that yes, this needs to be done. But at least for the first time, there is a need to show them that this is possible, this is doable, and by doing this, we can actually benefit our own livelihoods. At the same time, the larger ecosystem restoration is achieved, helping several SDGs and biodiversity. So yeah, I hope I was able to address both the questions, but yeah. And I look forward to kind of listening further panelists on these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Janki. And looking at the number of people who are directly or indirectly dependent on wetlands for the livelihoods, you raised a very pertinent point on communicating the importance and understanding of wetlands to the communities. And community has to be put at center when we are talking about wetlands conservation. So thank you, Dr. Janki, for putting the 2 points across and responding to our questions. So we've received some questions in the chat box. Dr. Asghar, if you would like to take up any of them. So Chaitri is asking if in urban area, how can we restore ecosystems?
Okay. See, the first and foremost thing for conserving or protecting wetlands in the urban or peri-urban areas is that urban planning must include wetlands conservation. This is the first and foremost thing. Secondly, there needs to be enhanced policy coherence and inter-sectoral synergies, which is actually advised for integrated environmental governance. And other than this, there are also ways wherein the nature-based solutions can as well be, propagated for wetlands conservation, rather than going into, I would say, strict engineering mode. I would rather suggest green infrastructure to be, more accommodated into wetlands conservation. So these are certain, steps or suggestions that can be taken up.
Thanks, Dr. Asghar. Chitali, I hope that answers your question. And we'll.
And sorry, Nupur. And of course, in both the contexts, either the urban or the peri-urban, the state wetlands authority are the nodal authority, and they are the ones who actually, direct every policy and its implementation for the wetland. So, as I earlier said, a coherence of and inter-sectoral departments is a must for taking up this planning work.
Right. So maybe as a follow-up question, we can take the next question that one of the participants has asked, that what are the policy and legal courses or mechanisms in protecting the wetlands?
Okay. So as I said, firstly, the state wetland authorities are the nodal authorities for wetlands conservation, and then these authorities are actually, governed by rules or action plans formulated by the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So, for instance, the Wetlands Conservation and Management Rules 2017. This has been recently launched by the ministry, and these rules are actually so much decentralized that the state wetland authorities have been empowered to take up any actions for wetlands conservation. So they've been entrusted with all major tasks and the liberties to implement those tasks. And other than this, there is this NPCA guidelines, or the National Plan for Conservation of Aquatic Ecosystems guidelines that were formulated in 2015, and it's being now implemented by the MOAF. And this action plan was formed by merging the earlier National Lake Conservation Plan and the National Wetlands Conservation Plan. So essentially, these are the major policies or regulations that work for wetlands conservation.
Thank you, sir. I think that answers the question. And before moving on to the next speaker, just one question has come in the chat. Can a government withdraw from Ramsar Convention?
Well, not really that a government can withdraw, but of course, discussions are being held for kind of de-notifying a Ramsar site.
Okay.
But once you become a signatory, I mean, I don't think it would be a nice idea for a government backing off from the treaty.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So we are now joined by our fourth speaker, Dr. Ketan. So Dr. Ketan, first question we would like to pose in front of you is, how do wetlands turn as a natural safeguard against disasters, sir?
Yeah, actually, as far as natural disasters are concerned, I would emphasize disasters in the form of floods. The wetlands are called, sponges of the wetlands. I mean, sponges of the earth, and it is now proven that whenever there is excessive rainwater runoff, or whenever there is a flooding condition, these areas with some depression, they store the excess water coming in the form of flood, and they don't allow this flood water to cause damage to people and property, So that's why this is one of the very important function of the wetland, that is the wetland as a buffer against the floods. I will give one very important example. There is many of you might have heard the name of Pantanal wetland. Pantanal wetland is it exists in South America, and it is not located in just one country, but about 3 countries like Brazil and Paraguay, and I think Bolivia. So the whole wetland is situated in these three countries. Of course, major part is in Brazil. So this wetland is a huge area of about, as far as I remember, 180,000 square kilometer, even more than that. So it is, if we take an analogy, it is said that its area is as large as that of England. Okay, so it is such a huge inland wetland. So there is one big river, which is, I think it is second longest river in South America, Paraguay River. And its length is about 2,700 kilometers. So just imagine such a big river, how mighty the floods would be in that river. But fortunately, this pentanal wetland is on its way. And whenever there is a huge flood coming in this river, this huge wetland absorb that excessive water of this river, and it saves people and property in this area from the destructive effects of floods in Paraguay River. So this is very important and very well-known example of how wetlands save people and floods. If you don't go to South America, if we take our Indian example, I'm talking from Gujarat. We have one very important Ramsar site, which is called Nal Sarovar, and its area is about 147 square kilometer. And during monsoon, its area, when there is a good monsoon, its area swells up to 350 square kilometer. When its area is, when one sees that its area has expanded from 147 to 350, it is the other side of the coin. It has stored that much water. Okay, so this Nal Sarovar does not allow the excessive water to directly go into the surrounding villages. Okay, there are about 15 villages surrounding this wetland.
Dr. Ketan?
Of these villages from the flooding effect. So here this is your question, madam, that working as buffer against flood disaster is what.
Ritika, did we lose Dr. Ketan?
No, but he has a little bit of signal issues, I understand.
He's dropped out. Okay, then we'll just wait for him to rejoin. And then meanwhile, maybe I can take my next question to Dr. Ranjit. If you could, sir, if you could emphasize on why wetlands are called kidneys of the planet, while more or less this question has been responded by the speakers. If you could.
નથી બતાવતા એમણે શું કર્યું છે બેકગ્રાઉન્ડમાં એક ફોટો રાખ્યો છે અને તમે આપણું ખાલી તમારું જે પોર્શન છે ને એટલું જ બતાવે એવું એમણે કરેલું છે.
Okay. Dr. Ketan?
Dr. Ketan, are you here?
He is dropped out again. Okay, he's here. He's here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I am Dr. Ketan speaking.
Right, Dr. Ketan, please go ahead.
Yes.
Dr. Ketan?
Yes, please.
Please carry on.
Yeah. Hello. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir, you are now, but you dropped out in between. So if you may continue.
Yeah. Okay. So I explained whatever I wanted to say, madam.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You very well responded the questions with very pertinent examples, both from South America as well as from India. And with that, I'll go to Dr. Ranjit with the next question, sir, if you may.
Okay, so the question was about why these wetlands have been referred to as Earth's kidneys. It has been partially answered by Dr. Janki, but still it's basically because of their ability to restore, assimilate, and transform the contaminants coming from the land sources. So like kidneys, they dilute and filter the pollutants that other ways, if they have not done that, it will end up in and contaminate our rivers and other water bodies. So they are doing that kind of a vital role that kidneys are doing for our human bodies. Many parallels can be drawn between these two natural biological filters. Kidneys are in charge of our fluid balance. We know that they preserve water when we are actually dehydrated, and when we have excess of water in our body, they tend to discharge the excess water. So wetlands also work in the similar way. So they mitigate both floods and drought by absorbing and recharging water, as Ketan sir has mentioned how they act as a natural barriers and they arrest the flood and other things. So they assimilate water, excess water that is coming into in terms of floods and all. So they when there is drought condition, like sponges, they give us the water that has been actually absorbed by them previously. So in addition to the fluid balance, the kidneys are responsible for removing unnecessary and hazardous substances. In resemblance to our kidneys, actually wetlands purify our natural waters. It was also pointed out by Dr. Janki. So wetlands actually do the purification. Apart from that fluid management or flood management, actually they purify our natural waters. They enhance the quality of water. So they filter and remove nutrients and other pollutants from stormwater and other effluents and discharges that is actually reaching our water bodies. So that's why actually as a management strategy, we employ constructed wetlands for wastewater treatment. When there is not feasibility of any kind of effluent treatment facilities, or extensive money is not available, or this one, the permissions are not there, actually we can employ constructed wetlands as wastewater treatment systems. So they also act as an organic wastewater treatment system, actually that which mimics and improves the effectiveness process that help to purify the water as natural wetlands are doing. So they actually do use aquatic plants and natural occurring microorganism and a filter bed, actually usually like of sand or gravel. So they can be used either as a secondary, even for tertiary wastewater treatment system. So because of their extensive options in design, materials and technology, that will allow us to use and adopt that to local conditions and land vulnerability. And it is in fact a cheaper and can be utilized widely. Because we can actually, with the design, we can actually control the flow, and we can enhance that retention time of that pollutants in the constructed wetlands, so which actually help them to settle, and it gets assimilated by the plants and microorganisms that is there inside that constructed wetlands, and they actually filter out all these pollutants and nutrients that is actually harmful to the surface water. And after this constructed wetland treatment, water can be safely released into the surface waters or can be directly used for various purposes. So we can say that studies have shown that wetlands actually reduce the nitrate load or nitrogen load by even 80%. So it's a very good thing that can be of vital importance to minimize the pollution and the eutrophication that I was explaining earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjit. You have very articulately explained why wetlands are called kidneys of the planet, and it was a really good explanation and has helped us develop an understanding around the same. And now I'll present my next question to Dr. Ketan, if he could shed some light on what is the value of wetlands habitats for biodiversity with emphasis on water birds. Dr. Ketan, if you may.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, means in India now I would say it's a craze to go for bird watching. Youngsters are very much interested in bird watching, and to see birds they visit many wetlands, they may be protected areas, or they may be just some village pond or something like that. So if this is the right season, actually, in winter, many migratory birds, they come to India, including our own Gujarat, because Gujarat is very rich with wetlands and water birds both. So if I'm not wrong, in India there are about over 300 species of water birds that are recorded, and out of them around 110 species are winter migrants. So our wetlands provide habitat to all these winter migrants. Okay, if you just imagine a condition when a migratory bird comes from European country or North Asia or Central Asia to our country, and if the bird doesn't get proper wetland habitat, consider a duck or some wadder or some shorebird. If it starts migration from North Asia or Europe and comes here and it does not get any wetland, how can it survive? Okay, so but fortunately India has many wetlands, inland, both inland as well as coastal wetlands. All these migratory water birds get sound habitat, good habitat. This habitat can be in the form of open water area. This habitat can be in the form of emergent aquatic vegetation. In common language we call them reed beds, reed beds. A lot of cattails may be there in many wetlands, typha it is scientifically called. So the habitat may be available to birds in the form of open water or some emergent aquatic vegetation bed, or just intertidal mud flat. Okay, if you go to coastal areas, intertidal mud flat is very important habitat. So all these birds, they get a proper habitat for feeding, for resting, and for roosting at night. Okay, so that's why they are very important. And again, if we see a lot of birds at a wetland, it indicates that a complete food web is operating in that wetland. Where birds are not just present at some wetland by magic. They are attracted to some wetland called X, Y, or Z, because those wetlands have very rich food resource, and that food resource may be in the form of submerged aquatic vegetation, or it may be present in the form of macro invertebrates, benthos, so that's why that the presence of species, the presence of many birds, and the many in terms of species richness and abundance. If we see good species richness of water birds at a wetland, it is a kind of litmus test. It is a kind of indicator that this wetland is sound in its food web value. It has a healthy food web condition. Okay, so in food web, fish is also there. Okay, so that is I think my answer, that why they are important as habitat for water birds and other biodiversity. Okay, and why only birds? If coastal wetlands also support marine mammals also. Dugong is available. Dugong can be seen in Gujarat wetland, also in Tamil Nadu. More than in Gujarat, it is commonly seen in Tamil Nadu. So it is a marine mammal. Dolphins are seen in coastal wetlands. Okay, so a plethora of organisms they exist in wetlands, and that's why they are very important as biodiversity hotspots. Okay, and now 2022 global theme for celebrating World Wetlands Day is wetlands action for people and nature. So one of the values is wetlands value as biodiversity reservoir. You might be knowing that wetlands are called biological supermarkets. Now, why they are compared with supermarkets? If we go to some mall or some supermarket, you see a vast range of commodities, vast range of products, ranging from toys for kids to clothes and even bicycle and many things. Just like that, because wetlands are very fertile and because they are very productive, they can provide food and habitat to a plethora of organisms. Okay, it may be a larvae of some insect, or it may be fish, it may be crustacean, it may be worm. Okay, so they support a plethora of organisms, and that's why it is compared with the supermarket. Just like in supermarket you get different kinds of products, in the same way in the wetlands you find different organisms, and that's why it is compared, it is called biological supermarket. So I think this is my answer to your question, madam, and I hope I have explained satisfactorily. Thank you.
You very well explained how wetlands are
Thank you.
biodiversity hotspots, and you've illustrated it through various examples from India itself. So thank you for that, sir.
Thank you.
With that, I would like to take my last question to all speakers. So conservation and protection of wetlands, while it is largely government's responsibility, I would like to understand from you how non-government actors can support the government in their efforts, or what kind of initiatives they can undertake. So maybe Dr. Iskar, if we may begin with you. Are you still here, sir?
Yes, Nupur. Hello.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm audible here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. To your query, Nupur, I would say that it's a wide spectrum of non-government actors. Ranging from an individual to CSRs and corporates. So, as an individual, I would say. An individual can actually start through practicing citizen science, helping record information from the ground and sharing it with the experts or other institutes. And if we move further up, the local communities that are living along the wetlands, they are the major stakeholders. It is they who should be given the right to express themselves. Their needs must be taken care of. And taking this point into consideration, there has been an initiative called the People Biodiversity Register by the biodiversity management committees under the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. Right. Likewise, when I said corporates have now a mandate under the CSR projects to help support conservation projects. So they too can influence many of the conservation actions. And so again, at individual levels or scales, there are many global or national programs where individuals must participate and at least spread the message. And these programs can be like cities for forest programs, smart cities programs, or even the Asian waterbird census. So I think this is how the spectrum can actually help the wetlands conservation. And perhaps I hope other plenaries might add to this as well.
Thank you, sir. So coming to Dr. Janki, if you may respond to the questions that what role non-government actors can play towards wetland conservation.
Yeah, thank you. I would answer it in two ways. One is I would raise a question. When we say sometimes government, the impression here is generally somebody at the center or at the state or So while the whole policy aspect and the government has a very, very critical role in that sense, the legal framework, policy framework. But on the other side, if we look at, with the 73rd Amendment coming in the, Constitution, 72 and 73rd, both in that way, a lot of decentralization of governance has happened. So in the sense, for a wetland, which is a very, very diverse body, those wetlands which do not fall under the purview of forest, are not under the land of the forest. Many of those wetlands fall under some panchayat, some revenue panchayat or urban local bodies. They themselves are also part of government. So I mean, in that sense, they have a very critical role to play. At the same time, several other stakeholders, Dr. Asgar did talk about them, but one thing which I want to highlight is a lot of the time community, at one level, education and awareness is where the NGOs and the CSRs can play a critical role towards implementation of a action program. Both this can play a crucial role, but at the same time, the research organizations and academic domain has also a very important role to play, because it all comes to the, the taking the action which is well informed, which is based on the true scientific knowledge and the latest of the research. Because wetlands in themselves are a very, very diverse ecosystems. I mean, when we say wetlands, then it is not just the village pond, but the village pond, restoration of a village pond or protection of a village pond is a very different from protection of a coastal wetland, which can have mangroves or salt pans or marshlands, or in that sense, also the threats are very diverse, as the Dr. Ranjit was mentioning. So a wetland which is suffering from a threat of, let's say, pollution load from some industry or some agriculture waste, or a wetland which is threatened because of some other challenge from, let's say, maybe the mangroves are being destroyed. They all need very different kind of solutions. So a technical domain, academic community, planning community, so they also need a very, very important role is theirs to provide that correct solution, which is well researched and in their domain. So yeah, so maybe a connection, a synergy between all these three is what is required.
Thank you, ma'am. That is a very pertinent point. And even the technical institutions, academic institutions, they can play a very important role when it comes to conservation of wetlands. And now I would like to request a response from Dr. Ranjit, sir.
Okay, I totally agree with Janki ma'am and Ashwa sir. Actually, there is always a problem when multiple stakeholders are involved in. So holistic management of a particular or a system is always an issue. So as a point of view from the academic and scientific fraternity, I would say that these NGOs and other organizations can play a more vital role than compared to or equal to that of a government organization, because actually they can go actually reach out to the ground level, grassroots levels, and what would I would say that whatever be the management strategies that the scientific or the knowledge people they actually formulate, it will not be a success, or it cannot be implemented successfully at the grassroots level if we don't take the local community into confidence. So the participation of local community is very much important or vital for the successful implementation of the policies that actually been formulated by the scientific fraternity. So in that aspect, these NGOs and other non-governmental organizations are very much capable. They can reach out to the people. They can make them actually understand or take them into confidence. And this kind of a bottom-up level approach will only succeed on a long run.
Thank you, sir. Very right. Community has to be at the center of these efforts. Now, I'd like to take this question to Dr. Ketan. Dr. Ketan, if you may, what role non-government actors can play towards wetland conservation, sir? Sir, you are on mute.
I would like to mention 2-3 activities which NGO can do very effectively. Number one is strengthening the citizen science movement. I talked about birds. So everybody wants to know that what is the population of water birds at a particular wetland. Okay, so there are so many wetlands and birds exist at this wetland in lakhs. They exist in huge numbers. So only government bodies cannot carry out population estimate of these birds. So citizen science movement is very, very necessary, and NGOs can coordinate these activities very well, because they are very nicely connected with, as sir said, they are nicely connected with even grassroots people. Okay, so I would emphasize one activity which NGOs can do is the popularizing and strengthening citizen science movement for birds, not only for bird estimation, but even for conservation, in situ conservation activity. If restoration of wetland is required, then NGOs, because they are connected well with local people, they can encourage local people to carry out restoration activities of wetlands. Okay. Then another activity which NGOs can do is doing awareness activity, nature education activity. Now, our Gir Foundation, which I am representing right now, this Gir Foundation is its status is non-NGO, though it is established by government. It is a kind of it is an autonomous institution, and it is NGO. So we carry out a lot of publication activities, not only in English, but even in Gujarati. We have produced useful books on wetlands to create awareness among students and other laymen also. So on one hand, we carry out technical research, but we bring out popular books also from that research, and we launch all these popular publications for society, for laymen. Okay, and we carry out nature education activities at wetlands. So we take students to some wetlands, and we try to teach them how to identify various birds, how to measure water quality, how to assess water quality using some gadgets in situ. Then we also try to explain them how to what is the importance of insects in the water. So this kind of activities can also be done by the NGOs, and this is what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. You gave us very true examples and from your experiences. That was great. Thank you for that. Thank you. Now, in view of limited time, we'll only be able to take few questions from the chat. And I would request anyone who have any additional questions, they can write to us. We will reach out to the panelists to get the responses. Just quickly, maybe Dr. Ranjit, if you may take the question from Vatsal, that how can we minimize methane emission from wetlands? So you're on mute.
As I pointed out at the beginning itself, health of a wetland is vital, because if the wetland is healthy, it can sequester carbon at a very high rates, many times higher than that of forest. So when these wetlands are under peril, under degraded status, the problem is that whatever that is getting sequestered in the wetland soil may be available for actually may get or released into the water bodies, in the environment, and that can actually from being the sink of carbon, it can act as a source of carbon, and actually contribute to our global warming. So that is the problem. So the basic thing is to minimize that methane emission issue or even carbon dioxide emission issue, we have to keep that ecosystem healthy. And the thing is that this kind of methane emission actually happens in very high anoxic conditions. Normally oxygenated water, there will not be any kind of methane production from the microorganism. So to maintain the water column at a healthy oxygen rate is very essential. For that, we have to actually make sure that there is a constant flow. There is no kind of stagnancy in the water column, and this kind of, and it should be actually free from the pollution. Then these kind of calamities or these kind of extreme events may not be that common in the wetlands.
Thanks, Dr. Janki. So another question that has come in the chat is, so locals living in wetlands believe that migratory birds enhance the fertility of land, both for agriculture and fish. So is that true? I'd request any of the speakers if you could take that question. Dr. Janki, Dr. Ketan, if you may.
I think there are both possibilities, actually, depending on because we have seen here in Gujarat a lot of time there are views that the migratory birds when they roost, they sometimes eat the insects. That's one way of looking at it, and that helps in plant protection because they also help eat the pests which are in the plants. But a large number of times, especially around Vilavadar, where we were working once, we had seen that the farmers used to believe that because there's migratory birds, when they come, they destroy the crop, they eat the crop. That is also a belief. So in that, that actually saying that what local communities would believe is will vary from place to place, because I've seen that both the kinds of belief do exist, especially when they think that these migratory birds harm their crops. Then there have been instances where they even try and put some pesticide kind of things which can harm the birds. And then a lot of education is required among the farming community around that these birds are our guests and we should not be harming them. I mean, they are our guests, and they do help a lot to the farm ecosystem, which is a fact. Yeah.
Yeah, I would support explanation of Madam. I would say that Velavadar is very famous for very high concentration of harriers. Now, these harriers, though they are not exactly aquatic birds, though marsh harrier is a wetland bird. So farmers cannot say that they are harmful for their agricultural crop, because on the contrary, these harriers, they feed on many insects which are harmful for their crops, and they are voracious feeders. All these harriers are very efficient hunters, and they feed on locusts and other harmful insects which are not good for the farmers. They're not good for their crops. So we cannot generalize, that birds are harmful for farmers. They may be harmful sometimes, because ultimately either farmer or birds, they are sharing natural resources. We say that birds are harmful because they are not in our interest, but actually farmers as well as birds, they are part of nature only. So there some kind of undesirable issues may happen, but one should keep in mind that birds are not always harmful. Okay, and everybody knows the utility of owls. Some owls, like fish owl, they live around the wetlands, and they kill rodents besides fish and other things. So rodents are very harmful for farmers, again, for their crops. So we should examine each issue on case by case basis. And one thing is very sure, that as I told earlier, or I might have told that at some other place, that one of the important functions of wetland is to trap the nutrients. And because of that, the wetland soils are very, very fertile. And I have seen in Gujarat that many farmers take that wetland soil to make the soil of their fields fertile. You know, they take in the tractor, in the trailers, and they go to they take that wetland soil with the help of tractors, and they dump that soil into their fields. So wetland helps farmers to make their agricultural soils fertile. Though these kinds of activity are not always desirable, and there should be some regulation on it. But this is, I'm telling from the point of view how wetlands are useful for the farmers. Okay, some competition occurs. For example, if you are talking about fish, so fishermen face hard time when there are a lot of pelicans in a wetland, because pelicans' main food is fish, and they are voracious feeder. So of course, there are situations where farmers or fishermen have to face a tough time. So as I said, I would reiterate that every issue should be examined on case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your insights. While we have more questions on chat and some suggestions have also come, I would request the participants to send their questions or suggestions over mail, and we'll connect with you to the speakers. And with that, in view of time, I would like to thank all the speakers and hand over to my colleague Ritika for a vote of thanks. Ritika.
Thank you, Nupur. As you very rightly mentioned that we had our chat box zinging all the time. That means that the people are interested. And as we stated that wetlands are very important to us and we know very less about it. Just because they are smelly, we don't want them around us. So a lot has been discussed today, and since we have it on YouTube, many people will be watching and hopefully benefiting from the information and the cases that have been in real time have been told to us. Thank you all. I would like to go ahead and thank all our speakers for the day. Dr. Janki Shah, Dr. Ketan, also Dr. Asghar, thank you for staying. Dr. Ranjit RK, and of course, Nupur, thank you so much for conducting the session so well. With that, we hope that we go ahead and do more sessions like this and inform people in different aspects. I would like to go ahead and conclude the day celebrating the World Wetland Day. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.